Here are 30 online reviews of the audiobook titled, Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. Written by Gail Honeyman and narrated by Kathleen McCarran. 1. Highly recommended. I absolutely loved this book. I felt like the characters became like friends over the course of the story. It has been about a week since I finished it, and I find myself missing hearing their voices, especially Raymond's. The narrator did an amazing job. I don't know how she can switch voices in such a seemingly effortless way. This story makes you think about the people in your own life and things they have gone through to make them who they are today. I highly recommend this book to anyone. 2. The strangest but best book I've read. This book caught me by surprise. I had no idea what it was about and read it because it was my top recommended book on Audible. It's a very sad but beautiful story on childhood trauma and finding a way to live with life after it. For anyone with childhood experiences, it may be a bit triggering, but I find it to be just as much so healing. I recommend to everyone, just wow. 3. Takes a couple chapters to get started. I was about to give up on this book until about the 3rd chapter, when Eleanor's past begins to be revealed. It's an interesting story. I don't want to give anything away, so I will just express my disappointment with the ending. I thought it fell a bit flat. However, the performance by this actress was stellar. Switching accents left and right very well. I don't really recommend the book though. 4. Read it. After a very slow start, which took almost too long, I was starting to think about setting it aside when finally it piqued my interest. And boy, from then on it was one of the sweetest, most engaging and truly original stories I have ever had the pleasure to read. 5. Lovely and thoughtful plus a bit of humor. This book was a complete delight. The narrator was easy and fun to listen to. Her diversity of voices, amazing. The story wasn't what I had expected. It was an honest story, filled with life situations, relationships and mental health issues. Please give it a chance, the ending is perfectly surprising. 6. Gut punch. If you have experienced childhood trauma, beware. The story was honestly really well written, but heads up, spoiler, her mom is a monster. I really did enjoy most of this book, but it hit my anxiety hard towards the end. 7. Enjoyable, but not a comedy. Mild spoiler alert, so many of the reviews for this title call it funny or hilarious. It is neither, although it is witty and at times made me laugh. I suppose if you tried to market it as survivor of horrific childhood trauma narrowly escapes suicide, learns how to make friends and interact with people instead of drinking herself numb, it might not sell as well. That said, the characters are endearing and it's generally well written. The narrator gives it a lot of local color with some good Scottish accents, at least to my American ear. 8. CTC Book Club Choice. I had 2 deaths in the family. This was my book club book for the month. I decided to do audio for the first time. If I would have enjoyed reading it, but I liked listening to it. I'm glad she got rid of mommy. In time she will just fine. Sometimes to detail describing a scene what Eleanor saw. I liked it, but it's not a keeper. If I really loved it, I'd buy the book. Put on my bookshelf. But I only liked it. 9. Oh, Eleanor, you are so very unique, love you. Eleanor is very aware of life. Her sense of humor is very dry, which makes Raymond crack up laughing. The unlikely relationship between E and R blooms and prospers, both of them. Forever friends, that's for sure, and unless the author wets her pen to give us a sequel, come on Gail, please, we want more, and so do E and R, they told me so. 10. Terrific narration, but I didn't care for this. I understand that tons of people loved this book, but I didn't. It's not that I hated it at all, the characters were well developed and I really felt for Eleanor. It's that the story really didn't have a purpose, other than to follow the life of this socially awkward, borderline autistic woman. The last 1/4 of the book was the most interesting, but was also very dark. I am just coming off of the Alice Network and Next Year in Havana, which I found much more enjoyable. This was hard to get through and I often found myself asking why I was listening. I finished it because of all the great reviews and thought maybe I was missing something. Yes, it was a deeply profound book, but not at all entertaining to me. However, the narrator was excellent. 11. Great story, but heartbreaking. It took me a while to warm to this story, but the title character, Eleanor, is so compelling in her dysfunctional way that I stayed with it. This reminded me of A Man Called Ove. Both have a central character that is initially off-putting but becomes sympathetic as the narrative reveals terrible past events. I wasn't at all surprised by any of the big reveals in the story, but I was so hoping for Eleanor to finally be completely fine. Some really sad/heartbreaking sections, be sure to have Kleenex. And the narration was perfect. Kathleen McCartan really personified Eleanor. 12. Good story, excellent narration. Eleanor Oliphant is a clever and humorous novel. The story is entertaining, and it kept my attention. The narrator really shines in this performance. With a different narrator, I would not have enjoyed this recording as much. This is not typically the type book I choose, but after listening to it, I may branch out more in the future. Audible should be proud of this one. Don't hesitate to give it a try. Overall rating, 4.42 stars. 13. Quite disappointed given the ratings. The story started out painfully slow. There were attempts at a build-up, but never quite got there. I like the quirkiness of Eleanor, but really that was about it. There was so much opportunity to really round out the story with the relationships and how Eleanor got to be where she was. I kept expecting it and looking for it, and it just amounted to a huge dud. I felt like my 11 hours and 2 minutes was a great waste of my time and life. Now I don't trust these ratings. Sad. 14. Exquisite writing, fantastic narrator. The detail, descriptions, and subtle moments are just perfection. I will never forget this book and the character like no other, that is Eleanor Oliphant. It's hard to put words around it now because it's still ruminating inside me, but this was absolutely one of my all-time favorites. Love the plot twist at the very end concerning her mother. Highly recommend this book. 15. Slow and not particularly interesting. I really thought this book was slow and tedious and not a particularly interesting story. The character development was well done, but that was basically the content of the entire book. I just wanted it to be over. I don't really understand all the rave reviews. I would not recommend it to a friend. 16. Completely dry. I keep seeing reviews for this book and it was a recommended book amongst my book club, however I didn't really think this book was good read. I understand the message it was portraying, yet the story was a bit dry. The author could have talked about the deranged mother more, to show Eleanor's survival and mainframe after dealing with her mother's failed attempt to kill her and the death of her sister. The after effects of the foster homes and living alone after trauma. There's so many ways or directions that could have been taken to show a clearer picture and to make the story more enjoyable. Oh well, can't get that time back, on to the next one. Number Book 23 of 2019. Number Bookworm. Number What's Next? 17. Great story, but heed the trigger warning. The story and the performance of this book are stellar. The author very poignantly expresses the anguish and depression of the main character, which can be triggering, as other reviewers have mentioned. If you are going through a time that is unsettling, be sure that you can handle the weight of hearing your inner demons vocalized before reading this. For everyone else, this book is an entertaining and well-written insight into the world of the socially awkward and depressed. I am giving this 4 stars overall because I was going through a hard time when I read this and it was a very heavy book for me to get through. I am still glad that I read it and am planning on reading it again now that I have moved on from my previous situation. 18. Expected more. This was a disappointment. Eleanor is not quirky or funny or anything but badly messed up mentally because of her tragic past. It felt like spending my time in the mind of a 7-year-old and living with mental health issues. Not that that would have made the book bad, it's just that was also unrealistic. Here is a grown woman that has never seen or even knows about people slow dancing. These little revelations about obvious things made it too implausible and made me dislike her. It's hard to enjoy the rest of the characters when the heroine is irritating. 19. Slow start, but ultimately a great story. It took me a while, like 6 or 7 hours, to get into the story. Unfolded very slow. There were a few times I chuckled in those early hours, due to the quirkiness of Eleanor. But once I turned that corner, I couldn't stop listening. Was a great story. Eleanor was an endearing character, and the twist at the end was completely unexpected. Can't wait for the movie, which I read Reese Witherspoon has purchased. 20. Not for me. I feel as though there wasn't a lot to this story. I kept waiting for something to happen. At one point, I came back and read the reviews and some said to stick it out and read to the end, but I think it was just a waste of my time. Maybe some will enjoy the story, but I just didn't find that much interesting happened and the narration tended to be monotone. I found myself drifting off and daydreaming because the story was not intriguing. 21. Just beautiful. A book you can't pin down. This is a beautiful book. It changes genres throughout. At first it seems slightly comic, almost like Maria Semple's "Where'd You Go, Bernadette?" However, the element of mystery about her burns and the sense that she is avoiding remembering something permeates the narrative. As does the mesmerizing, creepy voice of Mummy. I have read many books recently where I realize halfway through that, however strong the plot, I just don't care about the characters. I felt protective of Eleanor from the very beginning. Ms. Honeyman builds such a strong impression of Eleanor that the reader is compelled to take the journey with her. We laugh, but only gently, at her misunderstanding of her fellow humans. And when all is revealed at the end, it's hard not to cry for her. However, with Glenn the cat and Raymond, her smoking, sweet, sincere friend, we are left hoping that the rest of her life will heal the wounds of the first. 22. Not what I was expecting. In my opinion, the narrator's way of speaking is weird and becomes really irritating after a couple of chapters. I'm English, but her accent doesn't sound like it comes from anywhere in Britain. The book is described as being hilarious, but I found it only mildly amusing in a very few places. As you can tell, I wasn't impressed. 23. Kept getting better and better. Eleanor Oliphant is not a particularly likable character, but she is intriguing, so it's easy to get into the story. My opinion of Eleanor changed as her backstory is revealed. When I finished the book, I had a smile on my face. It was a thoroughly satisfying and believable ending. This was an especially enjoyable book to listen to on Audible because of the Scottish accents. 24. Emotionally exhausting. The performance was good. So I don't think any of the issues I had with this book would have been better had I read a paper copy. I'm not sure what the point of this book was or what the author wanted to convey, because it definitely wasn't an enjoyable read. I gave 2 stars because there were some really great one-liners. I was so confused as to what was going on in the book halfway through that I googled the spoilers. After doing that, it was much more enjoyable to listen to. There was supposed to be a twist at the end, but it was more like a random note that didn't really help enjoy the book. Several people in my book club enjoyed it. I'll update my review if they saw something eye-opening. 25. Lovely time with Eleanor. I had such an enjoyable time with this novel. What a pleasant surprise Eleanor was for me. This book takes you on a journey through a roller coaster of emotions. Honeyman beautifully characterizes trauma and the grit it takes to process it in the world of loneliness and depression. A bit of a dark read at times, Eleanor's straightforward thinking will have you chuckling along the way. 26. Don't waste your time. This is an overused plot with lengthy descriptions of a woman who is socially inept, alcoholic, abused as a child, and unable to let go of the past. This story is not new. There are numerous novels about mental illness, and there is a lot of interest in reading about people who have significant childhood trauma. I thought this was boring, and had a predictable plot. Yet many people have indicated they loved it. 27. If you stick with it. Although it was slow at times, I stuck with it and it was a good story. I wouldn't try to compare it to A Man Called Ove though. 2 very different stories. This one had a little more grit. And I think it's slow on purpose. You really get a sense of the main character and feel like you are in her shoes. Overall, well done. 28. Fell short. After reading the numerous great reviews of this book, I purchased expecting a captivating heroine. Sadly, the book seemed slow with Eleanor's quirky behavior and social awkwardness. She led a challenging life filled with such tragedy, and I felt so depressed listening to this story. The ending was predictable and a bit of a letdown. 29. Dark, funny, with heavy content. I adored this novel. I love the realistic depiction of a character struggling with mental illness. The author builds her character in layers that help the reader develop appropriate empathy. Not only do you see Eleanor as a traumatized human with physical and emotional scars, but you also see the strength and courage in her character to persevere and overcome. I appreciate Eleanor's struggle to appear normal and her desire to be both invisible and social. The anxiety the author depicted was so accurate, and the relationships built on circumstance were exquisitely believable. 30. Wonderful. I'm a little bit in love with Eleanor Oliphant. She's one of the most memorable characters in recent memory, and her story is very engaging. She will make you laugh and cry. The author is brilliant at character development. By the end of the novel, I felt like these characters were people I actually knew and cared about, in particular Eleanor and Raymond. Narration was also stellar. I very highly recommend this remarkable story. Thank you for watching. Please, do not forget to subscribe, like and share this video. Tune in for more online audiobooks reviews.